About a month ago, something happened that if you had told me it would happen a year ago, I wouldn't have believed you. I won Speech and Debate Nationals with a magic trick. Okay, I didn't quite win. I made semifinals. I got 16th out of the entire nation. But I did spend literally hundreds of hours working on this speech, and so in this video I'll be breaking down the story of the speech and also everything I learned from it. Hello, my name is Josiah Gunther, and this is how I almost won Speech and Debate Nationals with a magic trick. The journey to create this speech began about a year ago. That was about 6 months into my journey through magic, and I was starting to get a little obsessed with it. At the same time, I was also trying to figure out what speech I should do next year for speech and debate as I was competing in that. So, of course, I put 2 and 2 together, got 5, and decided it would be a great idea to do an expository on magic. And for those of you who don't know, an expos is just a speech with props. I was mostly right. This speech did much better than I thought competition-wise, but it was also way more difficult than I thought it was going to be. This speech ended up being one of the most difficult things I've ever done. The first thing I had to figure out was how I was even going to blend magic and a speech together. I didn't want it to just be a magic performance, but I also didn't want it to just be a speech with no magic. I ended up deciding to just kind of talk while doing magic at the same time, which did end up causing some problems for me later on, which we'll talk about later. The next thing I had to decide was what I was even going to talk about with this, because every good speech has a message with it, something that the audience takes away from the speech. I didn't want to just say, magic is cool, but there's also just so many things about magic to talk about, I didn't know what to choose. I ended up landing on the topic of wonder. This is one of my favorite topics of magic, and, well, I'd also heard somebody I knew had done a speech on wonder the previous year, and he got second. So, I decided to do the same thing. So now that I knew what I was going to talk about and how exactly I was going to do it, it was time to actually create the speech. Which, again, ended up being a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. The first thing I had to do when actually creating this speech was write a script. That part wasn't too hard. I just thought about the things I wanted to say, thought about the ideas about wonder, and eventually, after a couple weeks, everything kind of just spewed out onto a sheet of paper. I had a script. But the second part was a bit more difficult. I had to decide what magic tricks I wanted to do in this speech, because I knew I wanted to do a bunch of tricks, but what tricks to do, I didn't know. Because I needed them to both be tricks I could do without really saying anything about the magic. They had to be tricks that spoke for themselves, but they also still had to be good, fooling magic. And keep in mind, I'd only been doing magic for about 6 months, so this part was kind of difficult for me. The first thing I decided on was the cups and balls. It seemed like it was obviously a good routine, obviously fooling, but also still could speak for itself. It didn't seem like I needed to say much about what was going on. That ended up being a pretty good choice in a state of the speech for the entire year. Nothing else did. Every single other trick I changed throughout the year, and yeah. And in the end, I landed on a set of tricks that I thought were pretty good, and so now it was time for the hardest part of the creation process, merging the speech and the magic. Merging the speech and the magic was hard. Really hard. Because you see, I didn't want to just have a speech and then just do some magic tricks on the side. I wanted them to actually be one cohesive piece. And that was rather difficult. By the way, if you haven't seen the speech yet, I recommend going and watching it. It's on my channel. There's a link there or in the description. And you can see how well you think I succeeded all these things. But anyway, I ended up deciding on a certain way to do this. I kind of just punctuated the speech with the magic and the magic with the speech. Then it was just time to sit down and practice. A lot. This speech took way more practice than I thought it would. As I already said, it was one of the hardest things I think I've ever done. But the first tournament was coming up soon, and yeah, I just had to practice as much as possible. I wasn't really ready when the first tournament came around. The first tournament, surprisingly, didn't go that badly. I got second out of 4. My category was tiny. And getting the second out of 4, although kind of cool, meant that I didn't check. To check, I need to be in the top 40%, and I needed 2 check marks to make it to nationals. That was my goal at the time. So I went home feeling slightly disappointed, and proceeded to rework my entire speech. Not quite, but more or less, yeah. I pretty much redid every single magic trick of the entire speech. So, and then I pretty much redid every single magic trick in the entire speech. I had a completely new version. I even re-scripted a bunch of things, and then I sat down to practice again. Because again, I had to match the magic to the speech, and because I changed the magic, I had to rechange pretty much everything. At this point, I was practicing literally for several hours every day, and so I ended up being pretty ready by the time the second tournament came around. I was feeling pretty confident, and, well, I won. But there was only 3 people in my category. However, that meant I had gotten my first check mark. I just need to get my second one. The big test came a week later at a tournament called SoCal Classic. It was my biggest tournament this year, other than Nationals, and, well, I won again. After that, I was feeling very happy I'd qualified for Nationals, and so now I just needed to sit down and create my final perfect version ready for Nationals. In between then and Nationals, I did one more tournament, and I again got second. Yeah, was a little disappointing. I was expecting to win, but I think I went in a little too overconfident. But after that, I had several months before Nationals, so I reworked a bunch of things. I kind of redid every single magic in the entire speech, as well as re-scripting a bunch of things. And then again, I sat down to practice. A lot. All that practice paid off. The entire time I was telling myself, if I break at Night Talk, this will all be worth it. And I broke at Night Talk. Made it to semifinals. Well, I was hoping to rank a bit higher than 16th and maybe even make it to finals. I was still very happy with how I did. Actually, the biggest reason I didn't make it farther than I did was because I included too much magic. My judges said that that there was just so much magic in there that it ended up distracting from what I was actually saying with the speech, and so they ranked me lower because of that. But all in all, this speech did really well. I learned a lot from it, and it was just really fun. And I learned a lot. And all in all, the speech was really rewarding, a lot of work, but really fun, and I learned a lot. Yes, I really did learn a lot from this speech. One of the biggest things I learned was that making a magic act like this is really hard, but it's also definitely worth it. Spending a year honing 10 minutes of magic to absolute perfection is worth it. And for several reasons. For one thing, it's really helped me improve my magic in general a lot. It just made me practice magic a ton. I spent so much time practicing this that I just improved at my sleight of hand, improved my misdirection, improved just all of the skills required for magic in general. And It also just taught me how to create a magic act, which creating something that cohesive, where all the parts cohesively work together into one epic conclusion, aren't just a bunch of arbitrary tricks, but actually mean something and also bring meaning to the magic and actually say something with it, as opposed to just doing a bunch of meaningless tricks. All in all, if you haven't done something like this before, if you haven't created a magic act before, I totally encourage you to do it. It will definitely cause you to grow in your magic, make you so much better of a magician, and you'll probably end up creating a bunch of magic along the way, and it will just be a good experience for everyone involved. Anyway, my name's Josiah Gunther. Thank you so much for watching, and till next time.